Welcome to my channel. My name is Charity, and today we're going to be discussing a topic that I have just been hearing a lot about lately. It's a topic that I am also just, interested in because it's things that have also happened to me in my personal walk with God. So it's a question of what do I do when my expectations are not fulfilled? I know that there's a lot of people, including myself, when there's things that you've been believing God for, you've been trusting, you've been praying, and then perhaps you got in the beginning, you got this assurance that truly God was going to do it. You got the assurance that it was going to happen because you believed, you prayed, you trusted, and then over time, looking back, you realize things have gone the opposite way. They've gone in a way that you really, really never ever imagined that they would go. It's just that there's a different direction that perhaps things have gone. And it's you begin to wonder and really think about how did this happen? How did things get this way? I thought, God, we were going that way, but now how is it that things are this way? I don't understand. And these are questions that we all wrestle with. They are questions and doubts that we all battle with. I know that we all battle with in one way or another. At one time in your life, you are going to perhaps experience where you are just at a place in God where you feel that your expectations have not been fulfilled. Things have not turned out the way that you hoped they would. You prayed they would. You expected they would turn out a certain way, but they have not. Instead, they've gone the exact opposite direction of what you hoped for, what you prayed for, what you believed God for. And so what to do? What to do when you find yourself in such a situation? Because it can be very, very confusing. I know for me, it's something that was very, very, very confusing, discouraging. You get discouraged because you think, why should I believe anymore? Why should I trust God? How can I even begin to trust God? When back then I trusted, I believed, and then now things didn't work out the way that I believed and hoped and trusted for. It's like almost you get to a point where you feel disappointed in God in some way. I have to be honest. You get disappointed, you get very, very disappointed with God and think, God, what have you done? Things are not supposed to be this way. And there's a lot of disappointment that can arise from that, from experiencing unfulfilled expectations, especially if you have been praying, you have been faithful, you have been hoping and believing and trusting, and then it's just things have gone the parallel way. And so it can be discouraging, it can be disappointing. Sometimes you can even have sometimes people want to give up. You can give up on God and think he'll never come through because I believed, so why should I believe again? Why should I hope again? Why should I trust again when my expectations, I put everything into believing and expecting and trusting and praying, and yet things have turned out the other way? And so these are the questions, these are the truthful questions we all have in our walk with God. We all struggle in our faith. These are the honest questions, these are the battles, these are the things we wrestle with God. Like, why should I trust again? Why should I believe again? Why should I, even, bother to start praying again after all things have gone the opposite way? It's very confusing. a lot of people get stuck. I have I have been in that place where you really feel stuck. You get stuck. So what do you do? What do you do when your expectations are not fulfilled and it's clear, I prayed, I trusted, I believed, I hoped. These were my expectations. So, but things have gone the opposite way. So what do you do? What do you do when things go the opposite way? What do you do? How do you get unstuck, if I can use that word? How do you get unstuck? So I'll just give my own experience, my personal story with God, with how really God helped me to come out of that confusion and discouragement and come out of, you know, stagnation and being stuck, like you don't know which way to go. And I hope that it can help someone in some way. I know that when your expectations have been cut off, there doesn't seem to be any satisfying answer that anyone can give you, or reason, or even hope. But really, for me, I can only say it's about beginning again. It's about trusting God again. Yeah, that's all I can say. So that's what has really helped me, because I remember about, I think it's been now 3 years, 3 years, yeah. So I was at a place in God where I was having this amazing, relationship with God. It was, because I say amazing, it was amazing and exciting, because in our walk with God, in our faith as believers, there comes a season when your walk with God is a bit challenging. You feel dry spiritually, you feel disconnected from God. There are those seasons in our walk with God. So I say I was in this season with God, in my walk, in my relationship and intimacy with God, where I wasn't in a dry season. I was in this season where, my intimacy, fellowship with God was really exciting. I would wake up, I would feel His presence all the way, His voice. It was an awesome, awesome season for me. It was an awesome experience. And so me and God were like, I know we are even now, but then it was, I can't even explain. It was a season when I really truly experienced God in such an intimate way, different way that I had never really before even experienced. But I was in this great season with God. My life was going great. Everything was going great around me. And so in my, God began to put on my heart to go. I knew this was the beginning of something new. A new chapter was coming in my life. And I had all these dreams, these goals. I had all these plans, which I thought, God had his hand on them. God was with me in this new chapter, these new things that I was beginning to start in my purpose. And so I took time to just pray. It was exciting. God was like, I'm with you, you go. And I was having an amazing time. And so I had all these dreams, plans, goals, and I knew it was just a matter of taking certain steps and things were going to boom. I was going to explode. My ministry was going to explode, things that I had hoped and prayed for. And so, well, as I was getting, just, preparing, planning, setting goals, and, getting out there, starting to do certain things, and God was with me. And I cannot tell you, in that moment, I didn't know what hit me. I didn't know what happened, but now I know. Now I know. But then I didn't know, because I think it was like some months down the line, as I was beginning just to step out into what God was calling me to do. I was beginning to step out with excitement, because I would always hear the voice of God. God would tell me, yes, go, I'm with you. This is how things will turn out. This is what will happen. And so I was really, really excited because God had also even just given me signs. And so I was excited. I was going all out with such excitement. And I was beginning to step into what God had called me to do with such excitement. But I don't know. And because I was going out with such excitement, with such zeal, I was stepping into what God was calling me to do. Especially for me, it was concerning ministry. So that's what I was beginning to do. And I had set plans, I had goals of where I wanted to go, where I wanted to be. And then I was believing God for these open doors, and I was really truly expectant. It wasn't anything that was like far out in the future. I knew things were laying down right before me. They were playing out, and I was like, yes, we are getting there. Me and God are getting there. But all of a sudden, so as I was taking on these steps, I had expectations of what I knew and believed the end would be. And I knew it was going to be this success, great success in my purpose, in my destiny, in what God was calling me to do. I knew, I had the expectation. I saw it. I knew it was going to end up in great success. But somewhere down the line, I can say like a year down the line, I I didn't know what hit me. I didn't know what really even happened then. I didn't know. But things just began, slowly just turning the other way. And when you have these expectations with God, and then things begin to tilt the other side, you are really holding on to with everything you have, and you are saying to God, God, no, no, not this way. We are supposed to go this way. You said this way, so let's go this way. It's like a movie, and you are pulling God like, no, 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 it's this way. But really, things slowly just tilted the opposite side. It was like the total, not like suddenly, but slowly. I could feel it. I could feel that things are tilting the opposite way, not the way that I want them to go, the way that my dreams and goals and plans and expectations are. They're tilting the exact opposite. And so I was holding on with everything in me. I was like praying and, day by day, just asking God, no, no, not this way. God, please don't let things go this way. You promised, and my dreams and my hopes, it's this way. And so I held on with everything in me. I prayed, I fasted, and things slowly just turned the other way around. Things just went off. And all of a sudden, all these hopes, the excitement, the expectations, the steps I had taken, to step into what God was calling me to do, they were all just coming down the drain slowly. I could see, because why were they coming down the drain? Because I would try to put in an effort. I would try, okay, today, this is what I'm going to do so that we push this forward. And then those things would not happen. You can call it, they would fail to take place. You know, I would try, okay, today, this is what I'm going to do. And things just failed. They didn't happen. I prayed, but they didn't happen. I fasted, they didn't happen. And I would tell God, God, you promised me this is the way, this is. But then, no matter how much effort I put in, things just did not work out. And I was like, what is going on here? And so I saw it, I slowly, but there's nothing. I put in all I could. I prayed, I did my best to really push and keep things going in the direction I wanted them to go. But they just didn't. No matter how much I pushed, no matter how much I prayed, no matter how I really just was on. It's almost like being on God's neck and saying, please make let this work. Let this thing work out for me, please, God. It means a lot, but they didn't. And I remember just like that was like 2020, and now I got to 2021. That is when I really knew things. No, I tried this, it didn't work out. I did this, so I just sort of like shut down. I was like, it's not working. And as I shut down, and then I looked back and then I said, oh no, everything I expected has not happened. And when you are expectant, it comes with such zeal. It's like you are on fire. It comes with such zeal and fire and passion and excitement. You put everything into that. And then so I came to the realization that things have not gone the way I expected. Things have not turned out the way, because it had been like, up to that point, it was like a year later, and there was just a shutdown. And I remember just, shutting down. My spirit was just on the low, 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 and I was like, and on top of that, there were really just chaos going on around me, in my own life around. And I really reached a point of, a low point in my faith, because I had put everything into doing what God had called me to do, but didn't work out. At that time, it didn't work out, and my expectations were, so I felt like my expectations were doomed. I felt like my future was doomed. My assignment was over. I'll never, in that moment, because I was confused, I didn't understand. But here's one thing that really, after I shut down, and that's the important point I'm trying to bring across. So when your expectations are cut off, they are not fulfilled. I believe that the first thing to do, I know, in the midst of the confusion, discouragement, and disappointment, that things that you hoped would happen have not happened, and moreover, they've gone the opposite direction. The number one thing that I've learned, and I learned in that season, is that when things don't work out the way you thought they will, the number one thing to do, I believe, is good. Like for me, I just shut down. I shut everything. I just said, I'm not. Well, by shutting down, I mean I really just. So by shutting down, I mean that I got in. I just wanted to be by myself. I cut off, a lot of activities, a lot of, these outgoing things that I was really into. I just cut that off for that season, and I just wanted to be by myself and really hear from God what happened. Really, I wanted to hear from God. That's what I can say. I wanted to hear from God and know what happened. God, what happened? Because I prayed, I believed. My expectations were up on high. Why did things turn this way? So, the number one thing we can do really is just step aside, step away from the noise, the activities, and get alone with God. And it's okay. I think most people don't do that because, they just go on in this confusion of how things have not happened the way they thought they would. And you go on in that confusion. But for me, I think that when things don't turn out the way that you thought they would, that's the time to shut yourself away and just be alone. Get time alone with God and hear what God has to say. Just set some time alone. Get in the presence of God and have some quiet time with God. It may not be a day, it may be, days that you have to do that, but it's worth it. It's worth it because it will help you, to really not remain confused, disappointed, and discouraged in God. And I believe that a lot a lot of people really remain in the confusion, disappointment, and discouragement of Things did not turn out the way I thought they would, because they will not, how can I separate yourself? Be alone. Find time to be alone with God. And so that's what I did. I just had to get alone with God and hear from God. I wanted to really hear from God. So that's number one. Have the desire to hear from God, because believe it or not, God has an explanation for you. He's going to help you to understand what has happened, what has taken place, and why things have gotten where they are, and why you are where you are. In the opposite of what you thought things would be, where you thought you didn't imagine you would be where you are. But I believe it or not, God has an explanation for you. He will give you understanding of why things are the way they are, why things have turned out to be the opposite. He's going to give you understanding. He's going to explain. He is willing. But most of us think that when things go the opposite way, God did something wrong and is not willing to even tell me why. So I'm just going to remain angry and upset and disappointed with God. But that's the exact opposite of who God is. That's the exact opposite of who God is. If only you will get alone with God, remain there, have some quiet time. It may not be like immediately you hear, but it may be days, but continue, just having that alone time in the presence of God to hear from God, so that right from the onset, when you feel, right then when you're disappointed and angry, and which is okay, and it is normal, we all feel that and we all do that, but in that confusion and disappointment, get some time alone with God to hear from God, to hear, so that God can give you understanding or give you an explanation, because that's what we all want. We want an explanation. Why are things like this, God? This is not what I prayed for. This is not what I hoped. This is not what I expected. Why have things turned out this way? We want that explanation, and God is willing to give that explanation. Not an explanation per se, but he's willing to give you understanding of what has taken place and why you are where you are, and what he's doing in that season, what God is doing. It's very important. I think that's what helps. It helped me to understand what God was up to. And then another thing, when you get aside alone to hear from God, set apart time to be alone with God, and just, get alone and try to what would you call, digest things in your spirit. Get that time alone to begin to digest things, begin to go through things and digest things, think through things. And so another thing we can do, really, when we get that time alone with God in prayer to ask God for understanding, also use that time, separate yourself just for a time. I don't know, it's different for everyone, but for me, I would go as long as it takes, for me to gain that understanding from God, and get, almost like get healed and get the strength to begin again. So I would do it as long as it takes. For me, I would do it as long as it takes for me to rejuvenate, to begin again, to receive that strength from God and courage to begin again, to believe again, to trust again. Because if you don't, you are going to begin to run around circles. You begin to go around circles, because you are moving forward frustrated, you are moving forward disappointed, discouraged, angry at God. And when you move forward like that, nothing works. Nothing works. Everything will seem to be working against you when you are moving on in life like that. So I think it's best, when a disappointment takes place, when something that you expected would happen does not happen, when your life turns the opposite of what you thought it would be, it's always important to take some time alone. Take that time alone with God. Take that time alone. Ask God. ask for understanding from God. He is willing to give us that understanding. And also take that time just to really digest and think through your life, think through things, so that when God can help you, you really, begin and give you that strength to begin again, the strength to believe again, the strength, to trust and hope again. And I believe that can only take place when you receive understanding from God of what has happened. And because that understanding helps to bring healing, it helps to, it's almost like reset you, so that you believe again, you hope again, you trust again. Because, God is always doing some things we don't understand the way he does things. He's working in ways we do not understand. And so even if things have turned out the opposite way, God is working. There's something is working which we may not understand in that moment. Something that is, a mystery to us, but he's working. And it takes really getting in alone with him to hear his heart for you, hear God's heart for you in that moment, in that season. But I think the mistake really happens when people are disappointed with God. They tend to shut him out and get angry and just say, God did something wrong. I prayed and God didn't answer. But having that kind of perspective really is, looking at God in a way that is far from his character. That's looking at God in a way that is far from his character. If you get angry and because you're disappointed and things, which is okay to get disappointed and discouraged when things have not gone your way. But when you begin to have this perspective about God, that you get so angry to the point where you say, it's God's fault. God did not do this for me. He doesn't love me. He's not good. Why would he do? That's, having that kind of perspective about God is really far. It's far from God's character. It's far because the Bible tells us that God is faithful. He keeps his word. He fulfills his word. When he speaks, he fulfills his word. When he promises, he fulfills his word. He fulfills his promises. The Bible tells us that God is not a man that he should lie. He's not a son of man that he should repent. Has he spoken and will he not do it? Has he promised and will he not fulfill it? So there's no question about God's faithfulness and, God's integrity. So I think that's the most important thing to remember each time or any time we come to a place of, disappointment when our expectations are not fulfilled. No wonder it's important to really just sit down, have some quiet time, and just, process things. Because when you begin to process, you get quiet and you process who God is. I know it's not easy when you are in that, moment of confusion and disappointment. But we can try, little bit as you get quiet and just sit alone and process things. Process what has happened. As you process, you begin to process who God is. Remember who God is. Remember his integrity. Remember his faithfulness. Remember God's character and nature. His nature is love, faithfulness, integrity, truthfulness. He never fails to keep his promises. So then from there now you can say, okay, if God does not fail and is faithful, his character is that of righteousness and purity. What happened here? So you need to reconcile those two. Like, God is faithful, God is truthful, is a God of integrity. But then here he promised me these things and I hoped for these things. So what happened here? So you need to reconcile the two. And then when you reconcile, I mean, in that moment it's difficult to reconcile, but it's important to have that balance of where, okay, I hoped for this. These were my expectations. They didn't happen. God is faithful. He's full of integrity. He's of a righteous character, pure and holy. He never fails. He keeps his word. You need to hold the map. You need to balance, because if you let go of the other, like you just let go of who God is, you don't remember his character, his integrity, his nature, his purity, his holiness, his righteousness. You let that go and you only hold on to what has failed. You only hold on to your expectations that have failed. You only hold on to your disappointments and what has not happened. That will lead you in a path of great confusion. And that is where most people even give up their faith. And they say, God is not real. God is not alive. This is not what. That is where. But it's okay when you face disappointment in God. Things don't turn out your way, the way you planned and hoped they would. In that moment, it's always important to hold the two together. Hold them up. Your disappointment in God and who God is. When you do that, I can assure you, it really helps, because you keep, the more you say, okay, God is faithful, things didn't turn out, the more you keep doing that, you keep, God's faithfulness and character will keep becoming, it will become more heavier and heavier and heavier. And it is what will again, resurrect that hope in you and expectation, so that you begin to believe and hope and trust again in God. So I think it's always important. That's the one thing that really helps when you get to that place of disappointment, with God. Another one would be, apart from you really setting time to process things and be alone with God, is, is process things alone with God. Get in and be alone with God, and hear, get understanding from God. Because I believe from there now, God will begin to reveal, I was going to say that another thing is, I think we need to be humble before God. Even when things don't turn out our way, I think humility is a great tool to keep us on that path of hope. It's really a great tool when you consider when things don't go your way and you are humble and you consider God to be who he is, that he is true, who he says he is true, and that you are a human being with flaws and you make mistakes. And so that really helps. It helped me a lot in a great way. It helps you not to remain angry with God. So here's what I'm saying. Here's what I mean. When things don't turn out your way, the way you thought they would, the way you planned and expected and believed and prayed they would. Another thing, apart from just getting that time alone to process things and, asking God for understanding, another thing to do is be humble. And by that, I mean humbly, examine yourself. Humbly examine yourself. The Bible says that we are to examine ourselves, test ourselves. And that means that in that moment when things have not worked out your way, the way you believe, perhaps the way God promised you they would, but they haven't. They've gone the opposite direction. The thing to do that really takes humility is just to sit down, which most people don't want to do, because no one, I don't want to admit most times I don't want to admit when I am wrong, because I don't know, it's just our humanity. We don't want to be seen as being wrong or doing something wrong or making mistakes. But let me tell you, we are human, full of flaws, and we make mistakes. With all our expectations and our faith, we still can make mistakes. Even with what God has promised us, we can make mistakes. And those mistakes can cost us. It can cost us what God has. And then the thing with God is that even though your mistakes may cost you, his promises, they may not happen in the timeline that you thought they would, but God is faithful. He redeems things. They never just get wasted, and He always is a God of second chances. Nothing dies or ends in God's presence. So even though we make mistakes, it's okay. We can always begin again. So I think that when things don't turn out the way you thought they would, and your expectations have been cut off, humble yourself before God. And the Bible says, examine yourself, test your spirit, test your motives, test your mind, your soul. What was going on in that season when things, I believe that helps, because when you examine yourself, you are humble enough to recognize your own mistakes, your own flaws in doing those things, or in as you were expecting those things. What are some of the flaws? Like for me, I can give an example. Like when I was stepping out to do what God was calling me to do, and then things went the opposite way. When I got in with God to gain that understanding, I began to examine myself, test myself, just in quietness, and you know, just be vulnerable, being vulnerable with God and being vulnerable with myself to face my own mistakes and my own flaws. So I had to do that. So I did. I examined God where, like, I would always pray, like, God, where did I go wrong? What did I? And I don't mean in a condemning to condemn myself and beat myself up and, remain in this condemnation. No, no, that it was not about condemnation, but it was just about soberly examining myself and testing to see perhaps where I could have made a mistake somewhere. I don't mean to start beating yourself up and condemning yourself to death. That's not what it is. I mean that balanced, sober way of just self-examination and self-evaluation, really. So I did that. I just sat down and said, God, what is it? What happened here? What did I make a mistake somewhere? Where did I go wrong? And I can tell you, God was faithful to show me, which was not cute. It was not anything I would want to admit. But He did anyway to help me, which helped me a lot. Because now I knew, oh, this, yeah. So God began to show me I had poor boundaries. I entertained a lot of toxic, people in my life that, I had poor boundaries. I can tell you, and so because I had poor boundaries, I allowed all these toxic people into my life. And when you are surrounded by people who are toxic, they are not necessarily there to celebrate you or push you forward in the good, in what is good for you. They are there really to tear you down, to frustrate your efforts, and they'll really just kill that dream. And so God showed me that. He showed me that. And I was like, oh my God, this is true. When God, because I was vulnerable, I was open before God. I said, God, show me what happened, what. And then He showed me, and I admitted I knew God was right. He told me the truth. I had brought in a lot of wrong people, around me and around what God was telling me and calling me to step into. I had brought on the wrong crowd. And because of that, really they came in with a lot of confusion. It was a lot, which really resulted in, you know, the things that God was calling me to do, they were hindered. They were, almost like killed by people. But in that moment, I didn't realize it. I just thought it's God. God is not working. God is not moving things. Yet I had allowed all these wrong people in my life. And when I had come to God vulnerable, open-hearted, just to receive His truth, to show me what my part was in how things turned out. And God showed me, this is where your part was. This is why you made a mistake here. You made a mistake here. You went wrong here. This is why things then. And when God clearly showed me, I had no argument in my mind. I knew, oh no, because I had to look back and I processed it, and I knew God was right. He was telling me the truth. And so from that, it helped me to just admit my own mistakes and flaws. And I was like, oh, I made a lot of mistakes. I had made mistakes, wrong decisions. And that takes humility to admit when things have not turned out the way. Just humble yourself before God and just, God, what part could I have played in this? But I think that a lot of people are scared to face their own mistakes and flaws. Because when you are believing God for something, we tend to put all the burden on God and think that it's all God. He's going to, perform this miracle regardless of what I do, regardless of my mistakes, regardless of what happens. But that's not how it is. Because sometimes God may be trying to perform a miracle and you stand in the way with your flaws and mistakes. And people, like for me, I had, these flaws. I made the mistake of involving people that really were toxic, people that were corrupt. They had a very, very wrong agenda. And then God honestly just spoke to me one day and he told me that I had to bring that to a stop for your own good, which was great. I now can celebrate. Looking back, I tell you, I celebrate that. I really appreciate God because now I see that He has this Father's heart. He has His best interest at heart for me. Because He told me blankly, He said, I had to save you, and I had to do that by bringing that to a stop. Like, he didn't say like a stop and so your dreams are over, like a pause, so that I could get the wrong people out of your life. Because if those people had remained in your life at that time and things had succeeded still, they were going to cause you a lot of problems. And imagine if you had risen more higher than you were then, and then someone comes in and you think they begin to betray you, and you have already built all these things, all this ministry, which was not going to be great. So God had to use his fatherly authority for me and just, brings things to a standstill. And when things came to a standstill, it was like I call it a divine pause. And then, because there was no action anymore, so the wrong people now automatically just began to fall off, cut off of me, because there was no action, nothing was happening. So they just naturally, got disconnected from me. And it was painful because at that time, I didn't know that they were the wrong. And I would say, oh God, now people are leaving, I'm all alone, I have no one, look at all this betrayal. I was crying, and in that moment, God said nothing. He was really quiet until when now I was ready to hear him. I was ready to hear his side. And I said, okay, God, tell me, what is it? What happened? And so God told me that he gave me his side, where he had to step in as my father with that fatherly authority to really save me out of distraction, remove the wrong people out of my path, out of my way. And then also, really, that was a lesson. So now I know that was a lesson. I have learned a lot of things from that pause. And when things, but what helped me is really when things did not work out, because when things don't go the way there's sort of like, I am calling it like a divine pause. Things seem to just be stuck, or there's confusion. There's confusion, it's not working out. So in that divine pause, I call it, it's an opportunity really for us to just look within, look inside, and seek God still, ask him for understanding. And also, seek God, because what comes out of that really is beautiful. When you do that, you will see that, oh, God meant this for my good. It was not to just shut my dreams and shut me out and not answer my prayers. Because there are people who take that that perspective. God does not answer prayers. I prayed and look at how my life turned out. But I believe in that moment, really, I received a promise from God, but I was so zealous and running way ahead of God that I was running too fast ahead of God. And so God literally, there's a day he told me, I have the responsibility because you are my daughter. I have the responsibility when you are running too fast and you leave me way behind to pull you back and say, no, 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 no. We are back here. Please, let's work together. So, God, I find joy. Now, that wasn't funny then. I wasn't laughing about because I was in a bad situation. But now I find joy in that and I rejoice and I see how much God really, really loves me. But even that time, I did not understand. I didn't get it. But when you don't understand, pray for understanding from God. I think a lot of people think that when things turn out the opposite way, we have this invitation from God. We can ask for understanding from God. He is willing to give us that understanding. He will. But most time, perhaps some people are not willing to receive that understanding because they are really just thinking, no, 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 regardless, even when God gives an explanation, no, regardless of this, but God, you should still have just done this for me because this is what I really wanted. But that's why I'm talking about humility, humbling ourselves and receiving understanding. When God gives us that understanding, to humble ourselves and receive it, and also humble ourselves to examine ourselves, the flaws, the mistakes, so that in that moment when there's that pause, God can work on our flaws, God can work on our mistakes so that in the future we don't repeat those mistakes, we don't go down the same path. Yeah, so I think those are the things that have really helped me. But again, there are situations where, again, all in all I can say is it's about when you have been praying and believing and hoping and you have all these expectations and things go the opposite direction. The thing to remember is it's about God's sovereign or divine, I got sovereign divine intervention or interruptions or divine pause. There's a sovereign hand of God, and he sovereignly somehow chooses to take things the opposite way for your own good. And those are sovereign acts of God. No wonder it's very important to always remain in close proximity with God. When things don't go your way, remain in God, remain in close fellowship with him, because then now that's not easy to do, but it takes, like, even when you don't understand, like for me, I had to do it filled with confusion. I didn't understand. I was confused. I was really discouraged, but in my heart I said, I don't understand. I'm confused. I don't get this. But God, I'm still going to remain here. I'm going to be here. I literally just moved. I couldn't even feel my faith then. I can't say I walked by. I didn't feel like I had faith. I didn't feel the presence of God. I felt dry. I felt perhaps I had committed some sin somewhere. And so, but regardless of all those feelings, I still just made the decision to just remain, to just show up. I would show up in. I had a prayer time with God, and when that time 9 a.m. came, I would just in my place of prayer, I would just go there 9 a.m. and sit. And sometimes I would read. Sometimes I would receive the strength to air out my frustrations, my anger at God. Other times I cried. Other times I prayed. Other times I read the Bible. I declared scripture. So it was like a wheel, a wheel of, all kinds of feelings and frustrations. But because what I did not do is say, because things have not gone this way, my way, the way I hoped, believed, and prayed and expected they would, because they have not gone this way, there is no God. God doesn't answer prayer. I'm not going to believe. That's the one thing I did not do. and then walk away from my faith, or walk away or give up on what God said. By God's grace, I did not choose to do that. I could have, but I chose not to. I just said, God, I'm going to choose to just remain in you, with all the confusion I feel, with all this doubt, discouragement, disappointment, all this anger. What I'm not going to do is give up my faith in you, or give up and then say there is no God. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to remain, but I don't feel you. I don't feel like I have faith. I feel discouraged. I feel confused, but I'm going to remain here. And that's what I did. And so, by God's grace, with His help, I can't even explain it to you. Somehow, I can only tell you that here we are in 2023. I have hope again. I have courage again. I believe in God. I feel my faith again. I feel His presence again. And like those things that He called